Good afternoon. My name is Benjamin Steinitz. I have the honor to chair this panel on BDS in everyday life and on campus strategies to combat BDS. One word to my own project. I'm the founder and coordinator of the Department for Research and Information on Antisemitism in Berlin. We do record and monitor closely anti-Semitic incidents in Germany, and yeah, for sure we have many aspects that are related to BDS in this sense. I want to give you just two examples from our own reporting that are not directly BDS related, but they may show some sort of how present Israel-related anti-Semitism is in day-to-day life. In December 2017, two men reserved a badminton indoor pitch. One was wearing a TuS Maccabi shirt from the local TuS Maccabi club in Berlin. Four men were occupying the reserved court, and as soon as they approached them, this court was reserved for the two of us. The reaction was immediately very aggressive. For example, one said, "This is always the same with you. Always you take everything that doesn't belong to you." And later, when the staff confirmed the reservation, it became even more aggressive. Words like "filthy Jew," "son of a bitch," or "I screw you up" were mentioned in this course. This was one incident. Another one at the tango event in Berlin taking place also 2017. So there's a dance course. People are mixing up, dancing with unknown person throughout the night. And the person who reported to us is an Israeli. And in a certain moment, she made public or told her current partner that she is from Israel. And immediately the guy started insulting her as a child murderer and stopped dancing with her, saying that with such people I'm not dancing, piss off, go back to Israel. So these are just two incidents out of hundreds. My colleague Alexander Razumny is here. If you have further questions towards our own work on the incidents, he is ready also to answer questions later on. I just got these two incidents as they are showing how anti-Semitic incidents related towards Israel are really present in daily life in Germany and everywhere else. I have a great panel here, and before I hand over to my speakers, I just want to give you a short idea how we're going to do it. We have two rounds, initial rounds. One will be brief problem statements by the speakers, and the second round will be on strategies, how to combat BDS in the various contexts. And I hope we are through after an hour, and then we will open up to you, and you can also ask your questions. And yes, I want to start with our colleague Tzahi, Gavrieli. He has an 8 years experience as Prime Minister advisor from Israel. He was National Director for Hasbara Information. Can I say it like this? Of the founders. Yeah. And since 2006, he is directing the National Task Force for Combating Delegitimization. Tzahi, please, I think in the task force you're combining many information from your Israeli perspective on the global outreach of BDS. Could you just give us some brief descriptions on the current state of BDS with regard to its global reach and local specific characters, please?
Thank you, Benny. Great to have you here. In the next 6 minutes, because that's exactly what I said to Benjamin. I will try to take you into a very fast kind of status. Where are we at in terms of countering delegitimization and BDS? Okay. So, BDS and delegitimization. I'm going to be very brief, so hold tight, fasten your seatbelt. This is a part of a cognitive battlefield, but it was always on the left side. The physical battlefield hasn't stopped in terms of Israel countering different terror attacks or physical disputes. And this cognitive battlefield is not just a merely cognitive battlefield, it has sub-different battlefield. Let's just review some of them. Economic battlefield, intertwined with sometimes academic, not the campuses, rather than speaking about CSR issues, faculty members, intertwined with legal battlefield, aiming at international organizations just like the Human Rights Council at the UN, intertwined again with the global outreach. This is not a merely local dispute that Israel had in the past 20 years ago. It became global. What about online? In the last 20 years, or maybe in the last, I would say 13 years, and Chloé is an expert on this, user-generated content. You can say whatever you want. I mean, BDS is residing within this networks, this online battlefield, and it's important to acknowledge this, as you will see in a minute. Cultural battlefield. When it came global, when it came online, it could not just pass the cultural battlefield, and we have some challenges with artists cancelling the performance in Israel, although there are amazing shows and concerts that were held in 2017, but still. And then you have civil society. When you speak about BDS, you have to speak about civil society organizations, because this is the grassroots engine. This is the civil society engine that you would need in order to portray this delegitimization campaign. A very authentic, I should say, movement coming from the roots. And the fact is that civil society organizations are sometimes hard to administer because they're top-down, because they're bottom-up, grassroots, not top-down. I can't just tell you a special machine. Take, for example, 4 organizations. Hamas, PFLP, both designated terror organizations. Muslim Brotherhood, another AMP organization sitting and residing in the US. All of them are calling for the physical destruction of the Jewish state, but they cannot say it. I mean, you really imagine that someone will walk into a room and say, hey, let's eradicate the state of Israel? No. So you need a more gentle, modern talk, human rights talk, right? So you would take your ideas, very concrete physical ideas, put them into a washing machine and just launder it with a whitewash, and come out with a very nice message. Really, let's speak about freedom and justice and equality. Who's here in this room against freedom, justice and equality? Anyone? No. Well, fact is that boycott, divestment and sanctions are all 3 economic tools. Now, in order to confront this, the government of Israel has erected a special task force. I'm heading this task force. We do 3 basic things: research, global operations, and cognitive battlefield, cognitive warfare. Let's start with some status or basic facts. Don't let others tell you what BDS is. We know. First one, who are they? Now, we have taken 6 of our top researchers and used a lot of materials and tried to understand, out of these 250 different organizations scattered around the globe, well, some of them are really irrelevant, but 42 of them are in fact relevant. And then we started plotting and connecting the different lines between those exact 42 organizations. Now, you have the civil society arena, which is the organizations. You have designated terror organizations on the red. And then you have the involvement of the PA, which sometimes, have a special romance, special couplehood with the BDS movement. And then we started, just like an onion, when you're peeling an onion and getting to the surface of it, into the core of it. And then we started speaking, okay, what's going on from the Palestinian Authority? So the BNC, BDS National Committee, sitting in Ramallah, headed by Israeli resident, which is sometimes an absurd of Israel democracy, but we are a vibrant democracy.
And this exact, I would say, organization operating from Ramallah is working with dozens of organizations worldwide and kind of trying to portray a decentralized command, but it is, in fact, directing a lot of organizations. A lot of campaigns that you have seen in the past in terms of boycott the State of Israel came from the table of the BNC. And it has on and on connections. This is connections between Europe and the Palestinian arena. And these are the connections between the US front. And by the way, as you have seen in the map, you have three basic geographical actors. Palestinian Authority, which would be mainly Palestinian civil society organizations, some of them doing okay things. We are in favor, as a representative of the State of Israel, we are okay with it. I think it's very important to enhance civil rights of Palestinians. But in fact, using this exact tool to denormalize the connections and the ties between Israelis and Palestinians, well, it's a problem. Okay, I'm ending the map. Well, the map also contains links, the red ones, between BDS organizations and two designated terrorist organizations, Hamas and the PFLP. And the last thing I would say, Benjamin, is let's skip this. If you see this map with so much of activity, with campaigns, with delegations, with conferences, with paying flights, I mean, you came here from Germany and from across Europe. Who's paying for all this? If you ask yourself, this is crazy. I mean, someone is paying for delegitimizing the state. So, 3 tiers in 30 seconds, states, funds, and crowdsourcing. This is kind of the breakdown, how do they use it in terms of the origin of the organizations. Any idea how much money? I said it in the previous panel, $100 million from 2014 to 2017. We can specify and spot and testify and provide the materials that we see these records of $100 million. Now, this $100 million, a large proportion of them coming from European states. And that's exactly what the minister was speaking about. This is immoral, illegitimate to support organizations supporting BDS. So I think I will stop here and might speak about this.
Thank you so much, Tzahi. I think in the second round you will have the chance to talk about more on your findings. Ms. Chloé Valdary, I have the honor to introduce her. I just met her today. Chloé is a brand ambassador for Jerusalem U. She publishes widely in several well-known, like New York Times or different newspapers. She was very broadly recognized for an article she wrote in the Tablet magazine in 2014. The title was "To the Students for Justice in Palestine from an Angry Black Woman." I hope we get to learn more a bit about Chloé's approach towards certain BDS and delegitimization campaigns on campus, and also some aspects on the Women's March. Chloé, please tell us a bit about the aspects on the Women's March. What does intersectionality, which role plays intersectionality with regard to the anti-Semitic rhetoric, which role plays BDS, and also you are very much touring the US on campus. Maybe you can give us also some idea how's the situation on campus, how has the campus life changed with regard to the occurrence of BDS or the delegitimization groups. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I would like to apologize in advance. I'm extremely jet lagged, so if I slur my words and I'm incoherent in some way, I apologize. So I think I'm just going to try to talk briefly about the broad challenges that we face in America. We face them on two fronts. We face them we face the problem of anti-Semitism in progressive spaces as a political movement. And that actually affects campus life, and that has affected campus life for a long time. The large paradigm through which, or the great paradigm through which a lot of these problems come, is a concept called intersectionality. So I'm going to try to back up and explain what intersectionality is, what the history of it is, and how it has become a force to be reckoned with. And then in part 2, I'll talk about how I think it can be reckoned with. Okay, so intersectionality was a legal theory invented by a woman named Kimberly Crenshaw in the late 1970s. She was working on a paper in college, in law school, and this paper essentially said that it is possible to experience intersecting forms of oppression, right? So for example, as a woman of color, I'm a woman of color, so I can experience oppression by virtue of being a woman, and I can also experience oppression by virtue of being a person of color. And these two things can intersect in important and interesting ways. That is one out of 3 claims that intersectionality makes, and it is the only claim out of the 3 claims which is true. The other 2 claims are what causes problems for Jews on campus and Jews who are trying to join progressive spaces in America, broadly speaking. The other 2 claims that it makes are as follows. Number 1, it says that the primary motivator of human interaction is power. So any relationship, any engagement, any form of communication between people is done in service of power. Another way of which to say is done in service of oppressing another human being. So that's the first problematic claim that it makes. And the second problematic claim that it concludes, essentially, is one of racial essentialism. And what I mean by that is it ends up concluding that basic human behavior and basic human impulses are the exclusive a priori sort of qualities of certain people. So, for example, take an impulse like entitlement, right? It is very possible for human beings to feel entitled in any given situation, right? Like I can feel entitled for whatever reason. But people who believe in intersectionality say that entitlement is a white thing, right? And specifically, entitlement is a white male thing. And so instead of being a normal human behavior that anyone can engage in, entitlement becomes a thing that is associated exclusively and pejoratively with white men. And there are a whole host of other examples, but this is an example of how racial essentialism happens. And then what you have from there is this sort of belief in this concept of whiteness, right? And whiteness is essentially responsible for all negative ills to have happened in human history. Now, what happens inevitably is when Ashkenazi Jews want to get involved in social justice movements in America, many people who adhere to intersectionalist politics will say, no, you are a white person, so you have no place in this movement, you are oppressing other people, or you are part of the systemic oppression, therefore you are not allowed. And on top of that, you're especially not allowed because you're a Zionist, and Israel is of course a part of this system of white oppression and colonialism that we're trying to overcome and rebel against, right? So that's intersectionality on the political level. I just gave you a political analysis of intersectionality. But why is intersectionality problematic on a more existential level, right? If we were to drill down into the essence of what intersectionality is saying, what it is saying is that it is okay to essentially assume things about people based upon certain qualities or categories that those people belong to. Whether it's skin color, right? You are white, so therefore you must have experienced X, right? Whether it's financial status, you are white, so you must be wealthy, or you must be relatively wealthy than your black counterpart, right? It essentially encourages us to make assumptions about each other and to prejudge each other, which is the definition of prejudice, right? And this is the broader paradigm in which a lot of problems that we've seen both on college campuses and in movements like the Women March, this is why it arises. So, we see this with BDS. So BDS actually on college campuses in America has waned, has gone down since 2014. it's still a problem on many incredibly influential campuses, including Columbia, including to a certain extent NYU, but it's not as popular or in vogue as it was in 2014, 2015 in America. But it's important to keep in mind, right? So what is the connection between BDS and intersectionality? In 2014, a couple things happened. The Gaza war happened, and we have this, anti-Israel organization called Students for Justice in Palestine in America, and they had their student conference at Tufts University in 2014, and in 2014 was when they made the decision to root all of their campaigning in intersectionality. 2014 was the year they decided to do that, and then you saw all of these increases in BDS campaigns, all these increases in physical attacks on Jews, on Jewish students. So that's how BDS fits into the larger framework of intersectionality. And then when it comes to the Women's March, right, it's the same thing. The Women's March in America, the top leaders, whether you're talking about Linda Sarsour, Tamika Mallory, Carmen Perez, all adhere to the concept of intersectionality, and as a result, they are very dismissive of Jewish concerns. They also are vehemently anti-Israel. And oftentimes, young progressive Jews or progressive Jews of any age are told to stay at home, that they are not allowed or they don't have a place welcome for them in the Women's March. So this is the broad challenge that we're dealing with because of intersectionality.
Thank you. Perfect. Perfect timing. Okay, coming from the Israeli and US perspectives, we will look a bit at the German context. I'm very happy to have Felix Klein here. Felix Klein, many of you know him. He was served, I don't know, since when were you in the German diplomat service?
Since 1994 already.
1994, okay. So since 1994 he was in the German diplomat service. He served there as a special commissioner to relations, for relations to Jewish organizations and on anti-Semitism. As in this office, so in the foreign ministry, he pushed very much the working definition on anti-Semitism through the processing at the ODIHR meetings and also on the recognition of the federal government of Germany in September 2017. Since May this year, Felix is the first appointee on anti-Semitism on a federal level in Germany. Felix, you were appointed in May 2018. In June, Pink Floyd founder and notorious BDS supporter Roger Waters attacked you personally during a concert in the Mercedes-Benz Arena in Berlin in front of an audience of like 25,000 people or so. And many more watching him afterwards when he posted it on YouTube. Was this your most important or shocking situation with regard to BDS since you took the office, or was it something else?
Well, I don't know whether Mr. Waters actually intended to make me so popular, because with that action he made me and my activities known in circles that normally would never have heard anything about BDS and actually the existence of my office. So in a way, I don't know whether he intended it, but he made me all of a sudden a popular person. And that was surprising, I have to tell. I was kind of informed by that by a Berlin journalist who wrote me an email and asked me, have you heard about the honor Mr. Waters has given to you? BDS in the past 6 months has taken, though, lots of my work and energy, and that was very clear. Thank you very much for this presentation. What's so dangerous about BDS is that at first sight, people who don't know think that it is a peaceful movement, and you said, who is against equality, justice, and freedom? Nobody, of course. But when you dig a little bit further, you not immediately, but you find out how dangerous and how aggressive it actually is. And this is one of my tasks, to raise awareness of the German public that BDS is anti-Semitic in its goals and its means, actually. that is not so clear. I mean, I'm quite happy that I have to say that BDS is less strong in Germany than in other countries, but still they come along in disguised forms. They operate in particular in the area of the churches, cultural. You said that very openly as well in the cultural field, the pop festivals, or in the artistic field. It is particularly in Germany absolutely unacceptable. I mean, to call for the boycott of Jews or Jewish products or Jewish artists and so on. That it is always problematic. But I think if in Germany you have a sentence like this, immediately, of course, it calls very, very bad memories of the 1930s that don't buy Jewish products were used heavily by the Nazis. But this is what makes anti-Semitism anyway so special in Germany more than in other countries. And we have had several cases of BDS kind of involvement. So we had some, for instance, Protestant academies where BDS supporters openly present their cause, and nobody else was invited from a sort of other side. And anyway, I can understand also that the reluctance of people going on the same panel with BDS supporters, because I mean, if the rules are set that one person on a panel does not accept the legitimacy of the other person, then it's an unfair game. So I see myself always in a role to criticize that, and even if in that case the Protestant Church of Württemberg, this academy organizing the panel, is reluctant to do it. What I do is I call the bishops or the leadership of the churches and saying, look, at least you have to distance yourself from that, because it is absolutely unacceptable. In particular in that clerical environment. If you look at the churches themselves, they have taken the right decisions in the past years, going very much against anti-Semitism and all forms of it. But then all of a sudden you have BDS activities popping up, and this is contradictory. And so the least thing the leadership of the church can do is to go against that, and also the Catholic Church is much involved. There's a group called Pax Christi. They support very much, of course, the cause for the Palestinians, which is, of course, okay. I mean, there's nothing against. I'm not against any campaign supporting the rights of the Palestinians. What is unacceptable is using anti-Semitic narrative and calling Israel an apartheid state, which, as such, is kind of delegitimizing Israel, because no country that's an apartheid state could be legitimate. And Israel is a democratic state. So that's once again the crossing of a red line. There's lots of uncertainty in the German public, and we are. So I try to raise awareness. There's also a legal battle going on, because as you might know, some German cities, city of Frankfurt, city of Munich, and also the city of Berlin have banned their infrastructure for BDS activities to be used. And recently the city of Munich did that, and of course immediately that decision was challenged by BDS supporters. The case is being processed now in the Munich administrative trial. And it seems as if the city of Munich will win that battle, fortunately. And so it is a hard battle, and we have to see that raising awareness and counter-attacking in a way is the right strategy. And I try to do what I can to help not only the Israeli government but the German public with that battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. Felix has to leave a bit earlier at 4:30. Yeah, at 4:30 he has to leave the room. Thank you. Sebastian Mohr is a political scientist, and he is a researcher and program manager at IIBSA, the International Institute for Education and Research on Antisemitism. I'm very, very happy that he is here, because if you want to know something on BDS, you should talk to this man or to his institute, as they are doing a great research, systematic research on BDS in Germany. And we, as a Department for Research and Information on Antisemitism, we mostly rely on their information when we are talking about BDS. So thank you, you are here. Beside the research they are doing, they Sebastian and IIBSA are engaging a lot of networking, or doing a lot of networking stuff in Germany, a federal-wide meeting, and also organizing campus groups. Yes. So
you're running out of time.
Yeah, there's so much to say about your important work. Yeah, just give us some introduction and maybe some latest developments.
Okay. Thanks for having me, and thank you very much, Benjamin, for the nice introduction. Okay, I have 5-6 minutes left. So let me start to give you a short overview on the eclectic network of supporters of the BDS campaign here in Germany. The BDS campaign in Germany consists of mainly 6 different milieus. There's the first of all is the Palestinian initiatives, so I will drop some German names now, the Deutsch-Palästinensische Gesellschaft. There's the Croatian initiatives. Felix mentioned one main player, it's Pax Christi, but they're always the Friends of Sabel, they have a German chapter. And there are even some Jewish initiatives, like die jüdische Stimme für gerechten Frieden in Nahost. Then there's a left-wing or anti-imperialist groups like Solidarität International. We have human rights and peace initiatives like the Bremer Friedensforum. And finally, even in Germany, we have some Israeli initiatives like the Boycott from Within, especially based in Berlin. So according to the German BDS campaign website, it's not an advertisement now for the BDS campaign website, but there are around 35 organizations. 35 organizations who supported openly the BDS call from 2005. And this is, in my opinion, the hardcore of supporters of the BDS campaign in Germany. And if you look closer to these groups, you will see that around, I guess, 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 of the organizations, of the 35 organizations, have close ties to the MLPD. The MLPD is the Marxist-Leninist Party of Germany, and it's a very small radical left-wing party. And it's, by the way, it's how do we call it? It's observed by the Verfassungsschutz. It's domestic intelligence service of the Federal Republic of Germany. And I guess it's important to know this because it gives you an idea how small the milieu of BDS activists is in Germany. And we are talking here about, talking about 200 to 300 people who are actively supporting the BDS campaign in Germany. And that's not a lot, not many people. And I guess this is really a main difference to the United States, to Great Britain, to South Africa, or to Chile. And it's important to have this in mind, because BDS in Germany is still a marginal phenomena. It's a Randphänomen, and I guess it's very important to keep that in mind for the course in Germany. on the other side, there's BDS is more often mentioned in newspapers in the last couple of years, and unlike 2015 and 2016, conflicts between boycott supporters and their opponents are not limited anymore to radical left-wing groups or to groups like the LGBTIQ or anti-racism groups. It becomes more and more a subject of the cultural scene. There's a transition going on since 2017. And Felix mentioned it already, the Pop Culture Festival based in Berlin. And the important thing about what happened there this year and the last year is that the BDS campaign promoted their boycotts against the pop festival in Berlin over 3 months. And at the end, there were less than 8 musicians out of 120 who cancelled their gig or their performance there. And for BDS Berlin and something like this, it was a huge success. But I mean, 8 of 120, it's not a victory. It's not a success. And it's important to get this right, that there's a large difference between speaking and acting in the BDS campaign. And in my opinion, the BDS campaign is very outreach on social media, etc. But on the ground, there aren't any huge victories here in Germany and even in Europe, and I guess so in other countries out of Europe. When it comes to economic part. And so to end the first round, for me it's important that when BDS pops up, don't panic, don't lose your head. And as Volker Beck said 2 years ago here at the Israel Congress, BDS is not a Goliath, and I think we can do it, and we will defeat this campaign. And yeah, that's the first part of my talk.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to cite Volker Beck now. Felix, I want to know from you. 2 years ago, Volker Beck actually said in this situation on the BDS panel that we should only start a battle on BDS in a particular situation when we are knowing that we are going to win this particular battle. Only go to the ground when you know you succeed. What is your approach on this? Do you have criteria where to engage, or how do you go about state involvement in such occasions? Can you give us a bit about your strategy when something comes up?
Well, I think I wrote an article in the newspaper Die Welt a couple of weeks ago where I analyzed BDS and tried to prove how aggressive and and that it's really anti-Semitic. And before writing the article, I discussed with myself and my staff: is it the right thing to do? Don't I make BDS stronger than it is actually by writing the article in one of the German leading newspapers? And in the end, I thought yes, but it is the right strategy, because to make a problem visible is much better. If you want to solve a problem, then you have to first to analyze it and to put it on the table. Even if the danger is that you make it maybe more visible than it is, but it is there, and I think we should do that, because particularly here in Germany, once again, it appears in a very at first sight peaceful way, in an atmosphere like church or university, soft, so-called soft environment, if you talk about politics, and I think it is dangerous, and we have to make that clear from the very beginning. I'm very happy that the regional parliament, the Landtag of Nordrhein-Westfalen, of North Rhine-Westphalia, on the 11th of September this year, strictly denounced BDS, calling for action against that movement. I'm very happy that also the Bundestag decision that called for the introduction for my position in January this year also clearly set out that BDS is a negative, anti-Semitic and aggressive movement, and German politicians are called for action against that. And I think that's the right decision to make it clear. And particularly, actually, I think the federal state level is the right one to act. So we need more decisions like the one of the regional parliament of Düsseldorf, because basically that's the area universities and the whole educational systems have their jurisdiction in Germany. So I think that's the right thing, and I'm very happy. So thank you for the question. Tomorrow I gather all the regional commissioners of the Bundesländer that have appointed already commissioners against anti-Semitism, including Hessen, and I will talk with them exactly about that strategy that I think is a good way. And of course, it's not a Goliath. And Volker Beck, maybe 2 years ago, was right in his analysis. I think today we have to be very clear about that, and really we should not compromise at all and under-evaluating the dangers of BDS.
Thank you. Before you leave the floor, I once again want to know whether you have like certain different approaches. For example, I think many people are here today who are confronted with BDS in their certain environment. So, do you have? Can you say something like, when do you feel yourself, as the appointee on anti-Semitism by the federal government, responsible to come in? Is there a certain threshold that has to be achieved before you would step in, or like do you have something that we can work with at the end, like where we call you?
Well, you mentioned in the introduction of me that I was one of the promoters to call for the introduction for the working definition of anti-Semitism as it was set out by the IRA. And I always come in when applying the working definition, and when the result of that is that anti-Semitism is there in that action, then of course you can call me, and I will publicly speak out, and I will ask my colleagues from the Bundesländer also to do it, and that's very clear. And I mean, BDS supporters sometimes operate also very, very blatantly. They call Israel an apartheid state, or they use words like Gaza is a concentration camp, or other things like absolutely unacceptable sentences. And with these, or they say Israel is creating ghettos, and in that, particularly in Germany, in that case, you immediately have to act. Also, I think also as a citizen, because it's absolutely unacceptable to kind of compare the situation of the Jews of the 1930s and 40s with the situation of the Palestinians today. And in that respect, you have in me a strong ally, and I think with all my colleagues from the Bundesländer, we have to act, and we have to raise awareness in administrations, at the university level, in the leadership of cultural festivals, to have a strong stand. And if we do so, I think we have a good possibility to succeed.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you don't get too many calls in this instance. Okay, let me get back to Tzahi. Please, there was this year the first international legal conference that took place in Jerusalem. You gathered internationally lawyers to talk on the delegitimization and its legal aspects. Please give us some of your findings and what were the findings of this gathering, maybe?
Gladly. First of all, I would like to say to Commissioner Klein that I fully support your quote or your insights that it's better to take care of dangers when they are small rather when you have to look for them or to treat them when they are big. It's simple analogy of life and how you administer life. And Germany is an example. It's a good example of how states should learn from Germany and should learn from the past and the history how to not allow boycotting. And, sometimes I'm being asked, the same question that you were asked, whether you grow this brand or you diminish it. Well, I always use boycotting Jews or boycotting the Jewish state. This is much more clearer to people. Well, what do you mean boycotting Jews? Well, that's the thing. That's the final, conclusion. So thank you for that. You were asking about the legal initiative. A crucial part of our strategy is to form civil society networks in order to work better. When a government is working, it should work in a government level. So we can speak with our embassy here, with Bundestag or with the political parties or the administration, and it was a very successful G2G back in October. But in terms of civil society, and we spoke before about the civil society organization as a grassroots engine. We spoke about the grassroots engine. You would need to invigorate different parts of civil society in different realms and professional niche in order to have this confronting of this exact campaign better. So we have erected 3 different networks. The first one is, the name is GC4I, Global Coalition for Israel, 130 different leaders of organizations across the globe, coming from, of course, Germany, from South Africa to Sweden, everywhere, gathered each and every year in Jerusalem, getting materials from us, reports, surveys, a lot of information. The second one, and I will get to the legal network in a minute, is the Digital. Digital is a network. We had a mini conference here in this convention center. Friends from all over Europe came, about 25 of them. It's bigger than that. Digital. It's a network of bloggers and experts on social media, about 100 of them, 16 languages, if I presume right, if I remember right. And the last network that we have built, and it's all new, it's all in the last year and a half. The last network is Legal Network. It's called Legal Network Initiative. And we had the first gathering ever in Jerusalem for 3 days, bringing from different 24 states legal advisors that seeks answers and methods and strategies how to better react to the assault on Israel legitimacy. We have found that there are some states, and this is a very clear cut coming from this last February. There are some states, let's take France for example. In France you have a very interesting law which is called the Anti-Discrimination Act on the basis of, and you could choose the basis, and there in France you have on the basis of nationality. It means that if someone came to a supermarket and was, let's say, putting stamps or just stickers of boycott this exact section of kosher food, or food coming from, I don't know, different parts of Israel. It could be the West Bank or not. That could be violating this exact act because it's on the basis of nationality. If someone is being offended by or being demonstrated upon with the chance that Israel has no right to be existence or boycott goods from Israel, you violate my own believe as a national Israeli, as living in France, of course, not me, and this is a criminal act. And there has been some cases at the court winning these cases. There is a very clear cut in France, and I think that it's a good example of how to administer this kind of national attacks, not only, but by the way, on Israelis. Take each and every nationality. Each and every nationality has the right for its legitimacy. I mean, we're 2018. And by the way, Israel is a democratic state. Okay, so, yeah. Thank you. So for concluding, Benny, there's 3 different networks. The first one is leaders. The second one is all about the war of information, the cognitive battlefield, this digital, which is so very successful. And the LNI, which is now just like a baby starting to walk, but I think you would see a lot of interesting endeavors coming from this exact network.
One follow-up question. Is it possible for lawyers from Germany, let's say, in the room, or lawyers we know as organizations to bring them to your network meetings?
Yeah, it's being handled by the International Legal Forum. You can search it online. I can also provide you with the contact details of the people working there. We're going to have the next conference in this June, okay, in half a year from now. And this is not only, speaking about how do you run or how do you administer networks. Having one-time conference a year is just not enough. You have to be kind of a platform-based and anchor that always sustain this tension of activity. This is where we're heading. We understand that civil society should be addressed by civil society with different, of course, endeavors in terms of niche, professional niche.
Thank you. So, vielen weiter. Chloé, you are also founder and board member of the Zionist movement. Your manifesto defines Zionist as an inclusive movement. Before, you told me your reaction towards theories of intersectionality are theories of enchantment.
Yes.
As Chloé said in her first statement, practices of inclusion and theories of intersectionality have become an entry point for anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist rhetoric and exclusion, especially in the academia and social justice movements. What are your personal experiences when discussing with academics or social rights activists who exclude Zionists or Jews on the basis of intersectionality or theoretical concepts that generally equate Judaism, Zionism with the oppressing force and derive their anti-Judaistic, anti-Zionist position from this? Have you developed your own vocabulary to react to this?
So I knew that question was coming, but it's still a lot. So essentially, we're talking in this section about solutions, right? And insofar as I can tell, what intersectionality represents is a fundamental breakdown in human connection, which sort of sounds very almost hopeful in the way that I describe it in that sense. But like I said earlier, intersectionality entails encouraging young people to prejudge one another, to assume things about each other, to deal with each other in bad faith. And so the question for me is, how do I attack that framework with a better framework, with a framework that will essentially call young students and anyone involved in this conversation to their higher selves? How can I create a framework that will encourage people to deal in the spirit of generosity with each other? How can I create a framework that encourages people to treat each other the way they would want to be treated? And then how do I take that framework and use it to transform the Israel conversation? Right? This is sort of the goal I have set out to accomplish. So I, co-founded or helped found an organization called Zionist, which is a progressive Zionist organization in America, and we say that if the Women's March leaders tell you that because you're a Zionist, you can't show up, or you're not allowed to show up to these marches. Show up anyway. We will be there with you. We will give you the resources to stand in these progressive spaces. You don't have to leave your progressive label at the door, and you certainly don't have to leave your Zionist label at the door either. So we give people a table and a platform, all the while other people are saying, you have no right to this table and the platform. So that's how I approach it on a political level. In terms of, we go to marches that are held specifically promoting progressive issues. So, for example, racial justice. We actually went to the Women's March last year, and we marched with Zionist posters, right? And we were very much visible, proudly visible, and proudly visibly Zionist. And a lot of people came up to us and they said, we didn't know that this even existed. We're so happy that there is a platform and a space for us. So that's how I essentially approach it on a political level. But on, an existential level, which is really what I'm ultimately passionate about. And I said this in my on the other panel I was on. So a couple years ago, I was working at the Wall Street Journal, and I was working with a journalist by the name of Bret Stephens, and I had the task of developing a 82-page thesis paper on the topic of millennials and Israel, what works, what doesn't, and how to make it better. Two fundamental assumptions I discovered that we were totally wrong in making. One of those assumptions was the conflation of two important questions. Right? The first question is, how do we defeat anti-Semitism? Right, which is something we've been talking about, especially with regard to BDS. How do we defeat anti-Semitism? Which is a noble question and a good question. And we were confusing that with the question of how do we get young people to fall in love with Israelis, which is not the same question. The former question, how do we get people to fight against anti-Semitism, is a question of how do we get people to stop hating, right? But the second question, how do we get people to fall in love with Israeli society, etc., is a question of how do you get people to start loving. So we have to be. This is the question that I'm essentially focused on. How do you get people to start loving? The framework in which the Israel conversation takes place is one of animosity, is one of aggression, is one of disparagement. So that means that my task is to create a framework that encourages compassion, that encourages empathy, and then within that framework, we can have any Israel conversation you want. So I created a theory of change, which is a psychology of persuasion, called the theory of enchantment. As a part of, this was the end goal of this paper that I wrote at the Wall Street Journal. And the theory of enchantment essentially makes two main claims. I'll skip the first claim. The second claim is that there are three principles that can positively shape Israel conversations in hostile places. Those three principles are as follows. Number one, Israelis and Palestinians are human beings, not political abstractions. Because this is the first principle, and it's critical because the first thing that happens in hostile spaces is we abstract about each other. We turn each other into entities. We turn each other into objects, right? We do this about people walking down the street. We do this about strangers walking down the street, let alone people, in conflict hundreds of miles away. So what does it mean to recognize that we are human beings and not political abstractions? It means that as a corollary of that, we're not going to dehumanize each other. We're not going to stereotype each other. We're not going to ostracize each other. But we're also going to attempt to see ourselves within each other's stories and within each other's narratives, right? And all of these principles I supplement with pop culture because young people are interested and love pop culture. So I'll give you one quick example and then I won't belabor that point. So I said the first principle, Israelis and Palestinians are human beings, not political abstractions. So what's a pop culture lesson that can supplement that? How many of you know who Kendrick Lamar is? Okay, so some of you. So for those of you who don't know, Kendrick Lamar is a really famous rapper. It's important to know that if you're want to be in touch with the cultural zeitgeist. Okay, so Kendrick Lamar has a song called DNA, right? And in the song DNA, he says, I got power, poison, pain, and joy inside my DNA, right? This is one of the lines in his song. And what he's doing when he says, I got power, poison, pain, and joy inside my DNA, is he is illustrating the complexity of what it means to be a human being, right? We have all these things inside of us. We have the capacity to build. We have the capacity to destroy. We have the capacity to tear each other down, but we also have the capacity to lift each other up. So I will use that pop culture reference to support this principle of what it means to be a human being. So that's just one example of the theory of enchantment at work. Okay, so the second principle is when you criticize, we want to criticize in order to uplift and empower. Never to tear down, never to destroy. This is about anchoring our intention, right? This is about recognizing that anytime a community is engaged in bigotry, the people that they persecute are not the only people who suffer, they also suffer. So take, for example, anti-Semitism in Palestinian political culture, right? I'm going to criticize that not only because it's harmful to Israelis, I'm going to also criticize it because it's harmful to Palestinians. And ultimately, I want Palestinians to flourish, right? Criticize in order to uplift and empower, never to tear down or destroy. And then the third and final principle is everything we do, we try to root in love and compassion, right? This is the anchor, the antithesis of what intersectionality says. And what that means is if you are confronted by someone, if you're accosted by someone who says to you, you're a Zionist, so you must be a baby killer or a hater or whatever, you do two things. You say to them, first of all, this is inappropriate. I don't know you from Adam. You're prejudging me, which is the definition of prejudice. It's unacceptable. But despite the fact that you have prejudged me, I will not prejudge you. And in fact, I will invite you to break bread with me, to come and coffee with me. I will invite you to buy dinner, to have a conversation. Because in doing so, I'm not trying to get you to have every single opinion that I have on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But what I am trying to do is bring back compassion and empathy in the midst of profound disagreement. And that is the theory of enchantment.
Wow. Thank you. Sebastian, briefly, because we want to open up at the end for 10 to 15 minutes to the audience, please tell me or tell us a bit more about your activities on campus. I know you are organizing frequently campus meetings, and also maybe you can look specifically what are your personal lessons learned from those meetings with campus groups from all over Germany with regard to successful or failed misleading initiatives targeting BDS or problematizing anti-Semitism, delegitimization on campus.
Okay, that's a lot. I would propose that I will first talk about 7 talking points regarding the BDS campaign, because I think it's very important, even for all the people here in this room, that we have some clarification about the BDS campaign. First of all, it's very important to call the BDS campaign and not a movement, because a movement is so powerful, and it's a wording by BDS. So please use the right definition of BDS. It's a BDS campaign. It's a campaign, not a movement. So the first talking point is bring up that BDS isn't a peaceful campaign, because BDS, or there are direct connections between BDS chapters, even in Germany, with organizations like the PFLP. And the second talking point is that BDS is against any dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians. The third, that BDS supports the right of return. It's very important to make it clear. The right of return. It means there's no Israel left. And that BDS creates, and this is, for me personally, it's the most important point when we are talking about the BDS campaign, that BDS creates a climate that promotes violent and anti-Semitic forms of action. And Benjamin mentioned several parts of it, which occurred in Berlin. And BDS targets Jews not only in Israel, they target the Jewish communities in Europe, in the States, or in South America, and even in South Africa. And the last point is that BDS put a lot of pressure on moderate and liberal Palestinians as well. It's even an important issue. Okay, that was 6 or 7. Okay, thanks a lot. And oh, okay, I'm sorry for this. Yeah. Maybe I can give you a short service part for students here. Are there students here? Yeah. Oh, okay. So. To put it in a nutshell, when it comes to universities, when it comes to campus, talk less about BDS and talk more about scientific or academic freedom. and set up exchange programs at your university between students from Israel and Germany, and maybe with Palestinians as well. And but if you really want to initiate a resolution against BDS at your university, make sure that you have a majority for your anti-boycott resolution among the student representatives before takes a vote. And that means mainly do your best in convincing student representatives about the dangerous nature of BDS, because, and that's the important part, because most of the student representatives in Germany never heard about Israel boycotts or never heard about the BDS campaign. So that's the main reason why some resolutions failed in the first round at the student parliament, because of a lack of information. So I guess I will stop here and open up the floor.
Thank you. Yeah. I want to invite the audience to ask. Thank you. I want to invite you to have your questions, and I think we can gather 3 maybe, and please make clear to which of the speaker the question goes. Here in the front, and in the second, and then here in the front.
I have 2 questions. The first question is on campus. We saw now that BDS is not only with students, BDS is with professors, and that is our problem. For instance, in Munich, yes, that we have BDS on LMU, and that's not with students. We have to get the professors in the boat, because these are the ones who do this action now. And the second thing is what we see also with the churches, but we see that also in state parliaments, yes, in the cities, that a lot of people from different parties are always telling us, oh, we are always with the poor, and the poor are the Palestinians, yes. And this is also very important to influence the persons in the state departments, in the city the mayor and the parties in the city, the different cities in Germany. Yes.
Maybe to take, because really I'm not expert on here in Germany, but as a broader context, I would say it's much more appealing to talk about US campuses, students, because it's like young adults, and you say, okay, if they're nurturing these ideas, what would happen when they will grow up and take kind of different positions? It's not less strategic to speak about and to act towards faculty members, because faculty members, in fact, take these ideas and portray it or wrap it in an academic gesture or academic content. And if you would ask me, and I say again, I'm not familiar with all of the things here in Germany, but I'm quite familiar with what's happening in the US. And I'm telling you, what's your name? Gabriela. So my name is Gavrieli. So, Gabriela, it's much more important, as from a perspective to the US, without any reference or diminishing your great work, Chloé, in the campus scene, to work on this faculty members level in the US, because I feel it's like the voice of the administration speaks in the classroom. Okay, and if you speak about academic associations, which if they take a resolution to boycott academic or cultural ties, in a way, it's much more strategic than a students' council that took this resolution, and it could be effective in each and every way on Israeli lives or Israel as a state. Just know. I mean, this is on the campus. There's things happening in the campus. And next year it will be with no meaning. So faculty, of course, so very important. I think even sometimes more strategic than dealing with students.
Okay, the person in the back, please.
When we talk about BDS, I think mainly people talk about products, simple products. Are they aware that they talk about medical products, about MRT machines, about autonomous driving, about, I don't know, whatever, if your phone, if your smartphone works, it's because of Israeli products there. I think that they're taking out, in German you say, take out the raisins from the cake. But if they are aware of all the cake, would they also go for BDS?
The question is towards which of the speaker? Whoever wants. Who wants?
Your question is to the BDS leaders? I mean, you're asking, do they know they're also boycotting medical supplies and the amazing inventions that Israel companies has came up with in order to save lives? Of course they do. They say it's a technological whitewash. That Israel it's a tech wash because you're saying, okay, a handicapped that could walk. It's just like a miracle, okay? They say it's a tech wash, and I mean there are some very known brand companies in Israel that have been called to be boycotted because they sell medicine in the Palestinian Authority. What did you expect? That they would not sell medicine and not in the same prices in Israel? I mean, sometimes this discussion is, I'm not sure if you say, can you say in Hebrew, demagogy, or it's yeah. Okay, so it's so populistic that they even do not care. They're not into checking facts, really. This is the war of information. You counter lies.
Actually, I was talking about those who are doing BDS, it's one, but those who are the receptionists.
Useful idiots, you mean?
If they know what they are talking about,
well, if I was a useful idiot, okay, and I was be handed one plate, one cup in the campus or anywhere else with one report, with one specific imagery, with one side of the story, I would sometimes, I'm not asking so many questions. I will say, okay, looks like water, it's transparent, it's good to drink, I'll drink it. So the other side is not portraying a whole side, 360 angles of conversation. This is our aim. This is our aim to say when you're boycotting the state of Israel or boycotting Jewish products or boycotting Israeli-made inventions, you're in fact trying to boycott, the progression of nature, of tikkun olam, of providing good things to humanity. I mean, it's dumb. It's always dumb to boycott.
I would say, on a certain level, I think that it's important not to be dismissive of he whom you might win over in the long run, right? The sort of person who is in one particular moment maybe a useful idiot, right? But given the right type of communication and given the right type of campaign, so to speak, or alternative campaign to BDS that we might put out, may actually be convinced by you, right? And I don't think that he would be convinced by us if we are immediately dismissive of the fact that he's attracted to what's happening in the BDS sort of psychology of persuasion. So I think that's important to point out. But another thing that's important to point out is I think it will be interesting to experiment with this paradigm shift. BDS provides a paradigm of, yes, like social justice, and we are the people promoting social justice. Stand with us and you will be on the side of social justice. But all of that is through the realm of us versus them, right? The Palestinians are oppressed, Israelis are the oppressors. This is the language that they use, and this is how they get, I'll call them well-meaning but naive individuals to join their cause. The paradigm of us versus them, you have to essentially fight that paradigm, right? Combat that paradigm with its opposite. And I think that many of you in this room know this already. So I'll give you an example. I was engaging with someone on Twitter who exists in this BDS paradigm and was saying the usual stuff about, Israel, the colonialist, blah, 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 blah. And I said to her, look, it's simple. I believe that when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, these communities have been engaged in war for a very long time, which means that they have had to deal with a lot of trauma. Both communities have had to deal with a lot of pain, and both communities in this regard are in need of healing, right? And I am interested in investing and in finding those NGOs, those organizations that are interested in this question of how we can get both communities to have reconciliation and to heal, right? Which is a different paradigm from the us versus them paradigm, right? And I said to her, look, if you want to, join me in my search for this and join me in my pursuit of this, then I welcome you. I'd love to have a conversation with you, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're not interested in this, right? If you're not interested in the we paradigm, and you're only interested in the us versus them paradigm, then we're just not going to see eye to eye. I wish you a good day. And the conversation was over by then. But what was interesting is I said at the end of the conversation, like, I wish you well. And she continued to drop all of her anti-Israel stuff, but it didn't have the same emotional weight anymore. It didn't fall with the same compelling sense of attraction that it usually falls with. And at the very end, and I could be naive that this even means something, at the very end of our dialogue, she also wished me a good day, right? Someone from SJP who was calling me a colonialist wished me a good day. Now, I choose to look at that as a movement in a long series of movements that need to come and that could possibly come if we understand that to combat the us versus them paradigm, we actually have to provide a we paradigm and transcend the us versus them paradigm. So that's just another approach to think about when you're engaging with individuals on social media and whatnot.
Sigmund?
Hello, my name is Sebastian. I guess it is very important also in the fight of BDS to make it clear that the BDS is anti-Semitic, especially anti-Semitic. And that's why it's also important that BDS boycotts the Jews. Especially in Germany, it remains, remembers to the pictures of the 1930s where the SA guard stands in front of shops and boycotted Jewish products, don't buy by Jewish. And also, I remember just last year, there was at Berlin University, there was a speech of a Chabad Knesset, a Shoah survivor, and BDS shouted her down in a way which was really like the acting was like the SA man acting. And that's also, in this way, it is it's a racist movement, a campaign. It is they're acting, they're in the tradition of like the Nazis, they're expressing is to attack Jews. And that also to make it attacking Jewish, and also when you are
See, you have a clear question also to
no, and because Tzahi said Jewish for produce a Jewish state, and I just want to remark that we call on the history, on those histories.
One of our main efforts, just to be in one line, you see the slide, there's different examples from across the world of clear anti-classic, sometimes anti-Semitism. One of our main efforts is to expose the anti-Semitic nature of the boycott campaign, okay? And I agree with you, not a movement, a boycott campaign. So we're seeing on the same, okay, the eye level, the same thing.
I mean, I was not there in the room. It's in 2017 in Berlin at the Humboldt University. But there's a special case. There were two guys, one woman and one man, from the Boycott from Within movement. There are two Israelis, I guess. And, the problem is regarding referring to the year 1933, to the boycott. That how do you respond to an Israeli, to a Jew, who is very active in the boycott from within movement? Movement, yeah. Okay, but and you know it's a strategic dilemma for many people, because boycott from within group and actually there are, I don't know, 5 to 6, 7 people in Berlin. They are very active. Yeah, they are very outspoken, and they are playing with this thing that we as Israelis, we as Jews, and we are boycotting Israel.
I just think it's very interesting what she said. Don't discuss nations, don't discuss the religion, talk to people. Maybe you can ask, where are you? I don't know, who are you? But I think it's really interesting how the relationship between other Israelis against the state. That's, yeah, it's absolutely disruptive.
The problem is there is no room to talk, because the BDS activists are shouting, get physical, and that is the problem. And this is even important point. This is not a non-violent movement, a non-violent campaign.
Sebastian, you are really giving the words that I wanted to use the second time today. There is no room to speak any further. I want to have one more question here, and then we have to close this panel.
So, the question is Edward can answer. I think, so from my experience in Germany, even though BDS claims to act in a cultural way and in trade and in science, in Germany it's really pushed into the cultural scene. So I think there's no, in sciences at universities, I think they don't have any success there, so they go to theaters and music scene, etc. How it is on an international level? So are there bigger successes getting institutes scientific research so that actually the universities are boycotting Israel where the science happens and not only in the cultural way like you know in Germany?
One suggestion: try to answer each of you, like or whoever wants, and try to also sum your panel with this question, looking at an international context. And
let's say something concluding also as remarks for your question. 2014-2015 was I would say better years for the boycott campaign in terms of campuses, in terms of few companies have said that they would divest from Israel. Orange, the FIFA campaign started there. 2016-2017 was not a good year for the boycott campaign. If you speak about research, academic associations, as I said before to Gabriela, there was 0 resolutions in the U.S., which is important because the U.S. and Israel is a strategic allies in terms of research. In terms of economy, Israel economy is highly robust. It's very successful, one of the leading in terms of indicators, not in its size, but indicators of behavior, of economic behavior is one of the leading. So I'm left out with the cultural scene. Still, just to put things in context, 2017 brought to Israel 27 different A-class artists, not all the 27s, but really the biggest names. 2018 was not such a good year. But I think in 2019, with the Eurovision and with other endeavors, and I heard the names that are planning to come, I think we'll be okay in 2019. And I think that even speaking about, Felix was referring to Roger Waters, that is kind of a face in trying to persuade artists not to perform in Israel. I think they're already getting his message that we're speaking about crazy, wacko, anti-Semitic, really someone who should really retire. not because of his age, 75, but because he went completely mad.
Thank you. Chloé?
Sure, I would just say, from the American perspective, no universities have ever actually divested funds from Israel. It's student-led, so student resolutions are passed in the student government. So it's sort of a cultural movement, right, in parallel with what's happening here in Europe. And I think it begs the question, why are they so successful in the cultural arena? Why are they so able to exploit that particular aspect of society? Is there something about the culture that we need to understand, not only on a political level, but on a psychological level, and utilize for our purposes? It's interesting to see, which artists in the end say they're not going to perform. It's interesting to see which artists do perform and perform passionately and vehemently, and it's interesting to study the science of what's going on there and the difference. Friends of the IDF just had a huge gala in Los Angeles, raised $60 million, and of all people, I have no idea where this came from, but Pharrell showed up. And Pharrell Williams, I was so shocked, pleasantly surprised to see that happen. So, I think it's important to monitor these trends and try to, but also I think, and I'll leave you with this, the origin of the theory of enchantment comes from this idea that you have to get young people to fall in love with Israel, right? Emphasize that, and then you have to ask, well, what are they already in love with? Well, they're in love with pop culture, right? Pop culture is what they gravitate toward. So it is on us to figure out essentially what is the science of connection happening in pop culture, and how can we take that science and use it to build greater, more transformational, more inspirational Israel content that will sustain generational affinity for Israel among up-and-coming generations. It is not enough simply to say we want to combat anti-Semitism. We need to start asking the question, how do we create and sustain generational affinity for Israel?
Now it's time for advertisement. Our institute published a new brochure regarding the BDS campaign. It's for free, and it's, I guess, C3 upstairs. We have a lot of them, and take them with you. It's in German. Sorry. So,
yeah, we are over time. We started a bit late, but I think we have to move out, and the next panel is already approaching. Hold on. Thank you so much. I really learned a lot on this panel. I learned about theories of enchantment and some certain strategies, how to talk to people, very, very concrete. Thank you so much. And also Sebastian and Tzahi, what you promoted the networking idea a lot. Thank you so much. This was really a learning process for me, and I hope for you as well. Last thing, I mentioned only in the beginning, we are running the Department for Research and Information on Antisemitism, and if you ever confronted with any sort of antisemitism in your daily life, on all the seats is information how you can contact us. Thank you so much for your attendance, and have a nice day.